Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday, and welcome to our next LFG Live. We know that in January we went over foundations and clarity. February we talked a lot about people and leadership. This month we are talking about hiring and team structure. So today is when is the right time to hire? And the true answer is right now sitting at this desk. I don't know. Until we get to know your business a little bit better, I'm not going to be able to answer that question right away. However, we can talk about some frequent mistakes that I see people make, or even some frequent flags that we can look at, or some preparation items that we could look at to help answer that question of when is the right time for us to hire. So first, as usual, though, team, I will talk about the tea I'm drinking today. This is a lovely Christmas gift from my wife, Lauren. This is the company was really neat. I love all their stuff, just to look and feel of it. But Magic Hour Tea. This one is Queen of the South. It is a caffeine-free tea, but it looks absolutely delicious. So glad to have that for my afternoon tea today. Hit me up with what tea you guys are having, because of course I love ideas, plans, strategies on what the best tea to drink will be. So let's talk about this. When is the right time to hire? And a lot of times our owners don't always know the right time. It's challenging. It really is challenging to figure that piece out. But a lot of times what I see is kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. They either hire when it really hurts, or just hiring because it feels good. And we'll talk a little bit more about those things now. But when we talk about the hurts part of it, right, that is you have an owner operator, much like many of you, or leader of the business that is drowning in tasks, cranky because you're so overwhelmed, you're drowning, you're doing 12 different jobs, wearing 1,000 different hats. And then we say, all right, now we really need help. And we postpone that for a while, right? We postpone it because we go back into the idea that we talked about last month of nobody can do it as good as I can do it. And it's probably true, right? That's why you are where you are in the seat that you're in, but we have to let go of that in order to scale the business. So today we're going to talk about kind of a little bit cleaner of an idea of when is the right time to hire, because it's certainly not when our quality of business is already degrading because we're so overwhelmed, we're so overworked. That quality can't possibly be a great thing. And when I think about that, I think back to my days in express stores, and I'm talking to Ed, one of the owners, amazing guy. And I actually said to him at one point, it was during our growth, which I know I've talked about a lot over the last 2 months. I said, Ed, I think I'm doing a lot of things well. I don't think I'm doing anything great. We're too busy. We're just too busy that there's no way for me to do anything great anymore. And I hate that feeling at the end of the day to go home and know I did good. I'm still working my butt off, but I didn't do anything great. And that's when we brought on some additional executive leadership, which was absolutely key in us expanding the business and how we did. But when you look at when is the right time to hire, we don't just go based on a feeling. I talk about this a lot too. We don't just go based on a vibe, right? We base it on capacity. Now, depending on your type of business, and I'll go into it a little bit, there's different types of capacity exercises we can do, but we talk about capacity. We talk about profit. We need to be able to afford those people. And we talk about what your business actually needs next versus what maybe sometimes we just want. So let's dive in, team. So I've kind of narrowed it down. And again, nothing is going to be cookie cutter. Every business is different. Every industry is different. Every leader is different. Every team is different. But if I really had to narrow this down to kind of 5 different hiring signals that says you're probably ready to hire, it's going to be these. So first up is that you have a repeatable demand. And when I say repeatable demand, the first thing that pops into my head is like a retail organization, right? We have random spikes sometimes. So we're looking at repeatable demand, not a random spike. So we may have, for example, in retail, a Black Friday spike. You have those 1 or 2 days where you're spiking. Well, you're not going to hire on 100 full-time people to deal with that one-day spike, right? That's a one-day spike. You may hire on some seasonals. You may hire on some contractors, depending on the type of your business. But you're not hiring because you had this one spike, or you're not hiring because, wow, we had this one amazing week because, I think of my kids working at Crumble Cookie when their Dubai cookies come out. They get busier that week, right? Now we can plan accordingly for that week, but again, we're not going to bolster up the staff for the entire month simply because we have that 1 week spike. It has to be repeatable demand. Are we seeing more people come in? Are we seeing more clients want what we're serving? When your leads are steady, when your sales are consistent, when your delivery is predictable because you have those processes and operations down, that's when you are ready to bring on somebody else. So that's one of the steps or one of the measurables, and whether you're ready to bring somebody on. If your demand is chaotic, if they fall into those examples that I just had, where we may have a 1 week spike, or we may have a 1 day spike, we'll want to work on our sales consistency first, which we can certainly help with, or fixing our marketing, right? Making sure we're kind of leveling out that demand instead of being spikes, having a more level demand. Or in some cases, we're going to hire part-time or contract people, right? I think, again, going back to one of the industries that I worked with a lot was the irrigation industry. I was COO of an irrigation company at one point, and various other roles in one of the largest irrigation companies in the country. And we had our peaks. It was just natural. We're dealing with people's loans. So it's very seasonal. It's very weather-based, right? People are opening their systems at a certain time of the year. They're closing their systems at a certain time of the year. That's not going to be the same staffing demand that we have in the middle of December, right? So you can hire on part-time. You can hire on contract work. You can offer extra hours. You may need to hire some more folks on during those times and do layoffs in the winter. And that's why I say there's no cookie cutter approach to this. But even when we look at that, when we look at a 12-month scale in a landscaping or irrigation business, we can still see the ebbs and flows throughout, right? So it may not be repeatable on a weekly basis, but that year becomes repeatable. So you kind of know how to handle those ups and downs throughout it. Okay, so that's signal one. Signal two, this was a big one for me and one that I absolutely learned early on in my career from one of my supervisors, and is your best people are doing low value work. So if you have somebody that is your best performer, they're absolutely fantastic, they're amazing, they're incredible at everything that they do, they're very knowledgeable in whatever your industry might be, and they are doing things like answering the phone, and not high-level calls, just the day-to-day regular calls, chasing down invoices, doing admin work, which is all important work, but it should not be your top-level performer doing these things, right? If they're out running errands, you're burning through your amazing top talent on doing these entry-level things, right? So I like to look at it as, how much would I pay for this to be done? And if we're looking at that and saying, if I'm going to hire somebody, and maybe I'd hire them for 17, 20 bucks an hour, which is, for the entry or level roles in some of our organizations, would I have my person who's on salary earning $50 an hour? Would I have that person doing it? Should I have that person doing it? And the answer is yes. We're doing that. Not good. We definitely need to hire on some more folks. Now, when I say this, I'm always going to put that asterisk in, because you all know that I am a roll up my sleeves kind of person. I like digging in when I have to, putting in the extra work when I have to. So if there's a particular week where somebody's doing this, or there's a one-off where, let's say we have 2 people on vacation, so everybody's kind of rallying to help out, or we have this new product launch coming out, so we're all getting our hands a little more dirty. That's all different. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is, on the day-to-day, their role requires them, these high-level people, to do this lower value work. That's when you need to bring somebody else on board. A huge one for me, when we're talking about number 3, is our quality is slipping. So you have this amazing team doing amazing things. When quality drops, certainly there can be a plethora of things that can be causing that, right? It could be the culture. We talked about that last month. It could be the leadership. It could be the attitude. But one of the things we have to look at is capacity. It could be processes, could be systems, it could be so many things. But one of those many things that we look at if we see our quality declining is going to be the capacity. Now, again, based on the type of business that we are, or the type of department that we're looking at, that capacity planning could look a little bit different. But I think of one of the call centers that I worked with, where our capacity planning literally was looking at the amount of calls we get in a day, the traditional length of those calls, what the length of those calls should be, through some coaching. And that helped us iron out really how many people we needed and what people we needed during what times. Similarly, we did that in retail using traffic counters. How many people are we traditionally seeing certain times, certain days, and able to schedule accordingly? If we don't do those things and we simply say, oh, quality is slipping, we just don't have time to get it done, that's when we're going to see the quality to continue to slip down. If your team is skipping steps, if they're not going back and checking their work, if they're not following the SOPs because they simply don't have time to bring some other folks on. 4, we talked about this a lot in the last 2 months. When you, as the owner or CEO, are the bottleneck, if every decision, every approval, every customer escalation, every time we need to move forward on something goes through that owner, CEO, whomever it might be, that's slowing down all of our processes. And again, that kind of goes back to one of the previous numbers, right? Do we have one of our highest level people doing the work that kind of our entry level team should be doing, right? Are you, as the owner, approving a $50 bill credit? Are you approving redoing work that's going to take an hour to do, and labor costs are going to be less than $100? Are you spending your time approving that? Because by the time you jumped on that phone call to deal with that, we already spent more money on your talent than we would have had we just done whatever credit or, whatever thing we had to do to make it right. So if you're the bottleneck and you don't allow the team or have a team to produce those outcomes, we need to hire somebody else. We need to bring somebody else on board that can help you through all that. And the last one we're going to talk about is if you can define the role kind of in one page. You really know what the role looks like. You're not hiring just because of a vibe, how I said earlier. You're not just hiring because you feel like you might need somebody else, but you've truly thought through it. You've thought through what they need to accomplish on a day to day, not even day to day, depending on the role, but what their role is, what they need to accomplish, what those outcomes look like, what their weekly deliverables look like, what right looks like, what good looks like. We talked about that last month in People in Leadership, making sure they fully understand what right looks like. If you can do all of that, you're ready to hire somebody. If you can't, if it's still kind of wishy-washy, if you're really not sure what their role would look like, you're not ready to hire yet. Because what's going to happen then? You're sitting back going, oh, shoot, we're so swamped, so busy, I can't get anything done. Quality's degrading. We need to hire somebody. I'm not really sure what their role will be, but let me bring somebody on board. Well, we talked about it last month. You're not going to have clarity. You're not going to give them the tools that they need to be successful. You're not going to be able to remove the obstacles. You're not going to be able to give them a KPI because you don't even know what their job is. So what are you going to sit back doing? Blaming them for their failures. When in reality, we just hired somebody and put them in a seat. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit as well. But when we talk about, again, when we're ready to hire versus when we're really not ready to hire, those were 5 steps and when you're probably ready to hire. Now I'm going to talk about 3 or so of you're probably not ready to hire, 3, maybe 4. One is when you're hiring somebody simply to fix a broken process. Now, one of the things I look at, even though I'm a people-first leader, is what processes do we have in place? Because I truly believe that engages that people-first mentality. Do we give people what they need to be successful? But sometimes we're just throwing another person, another human being on top of a broken process. It's not going to fix it. They're just going to be, riding on that same bicycle with 2 flat tires as the rest of their team. They're not going to be able to be successful. Adding another person in is just going to create even more chaos, not fix the problem. So avoid hiring just to fix a broken process. Let's work on that process first. And look, maybe sometimes it does require that we bring somebody in, right? Because our solution might need a person, not the broken process though. Meaning, let's say, for example, we needed to revamp an SO or not an SOP, but a POS, a point of sale system. Well, maybe our solution is that we need to build one ourselves. We've done that before in a business I worked with. We needed to bring in programmers. So it wasn't hiring people because of the problem that we had. It was figuring out the solution and hiring people to do that. Second, hiring people because you're emotionally fried. When you are burnt out, the ability to evaluate your business is going to diminish. You're going to panic. Everything feels urgent. Even when you hire somebody, you're probably going to rush through the interview. Just get a person in. You might even ignore some of the red flags that they have that if you were taking more time, you probably wouldn't have. You're probably not going to do reference checks. You're just going to try to get somebody in because you personally need relief. And I get that. I do. It's kind of what I'm here for. I'm here to help businesses that are just too darn busy to do these things, accomplish them. So making sure that we're not hiring just because you're emotionally fried, making sure we're still taking that ability to step back and do things the right way. And then last, we actually talk about this more I think it's our last session of this month, hiring without a plan for training. Again, that's bringing people in and saying, I want you to be successful. Here you go. Go. Well, if we're not training them, if our only training is, go shadow that person. Well, we don't even know if that person's doing everything right. But if that's the strategy, or just get in there and just ask questions as you go along. You'll pick it all up. You're not hiring people. You're not hiring people to help you with your business. You're kind of gambling on just putting a person in there and seeing if they work. It's not going to work. Yes, onboarding does take a little bit more time. It does, doing it the right way. But it's that investment of time up front to avoid the problems that are going to come later on down the line. And, I think talking about hiring, I've definitely had a share of really good hires that I've seen companies do in the past. I've seen the panic hire. I probably have seen that more than anything. And the panic hire that I've seen usually uses some words that my teams in the past have known. Do not use these words in front of me because you will get a look and I'm suddenly distracted from the entire conversation because I hate it. It's people saying, I need a body. I need a body for this role. Or I need to fill some seats for this role. I need to fill some seats in the New Jersey offices. No, you don't need to fill seats. You don't need to find bodies. You need to bring in people who are going to be great for your organization, and the organization is going to be great for them. Because when you do that, you're really just literally hiring people regardless of what they might be good at because you're panicked. then you're going to find very quickly after you've onboarded them, after you've spent some time, and I talk a little later this month about the cost of a bad hire versus a good hire, or even just the cost of bringing somebody on board in general. But you're going to find after you bring them on board and you're spending all this time that they're not a good fit for the company, or they don't have the skills that you need. You don't have the time to train them. And again, at that point, you didn't really hire somebody to help fix your problems. You just hired another problem. We have to be able to have a clear strategic hiring plan in order to make that hire successful. So the interview process has to be correct. The onboarding process has to be correct. And we have to make sure it's a right fit for the organization. On the flip side, I've absolutely seen one of the last organizations I worked with, the marketing company. I thought they did great. I helped them, but I thought they did great with their hiring strategy. They really looked at where the needs of the business were and found people that were just amazing in that industry, and some even outside of the industry, but had the skills that we were looking for. But we repeated the mantra, hiring better than your best, making sure that we weren't just filling a seat. We were truly, truly looking for talented people. And once we had those talented people on board, we documented things. We gave them clear SOPs. We gave them what right looks like. We supported them. We made sure we set them up to win, because that's what you should want, right? You bring somebody in, you want them to win. We're winning together. You don't want to bring them in to fail. So watching that happen is amazing. And then one of the more recent things that I saw, and I'm going to get into this in a moment, is people hiring based on kind of what was fun for them. Now, the next section I'm going to talk about a little bit is, we talk about the needs of the business, but earlier on, I also said we have to have the money to do it, right? If you're a brand new startup company, you haven't received any grants or loans quite yet, maybe you don't have a big budget, you really got to look at what that cash flow looks like, right? But in some cases, we had people who hired without really looking at that. They looked at kind of what they wanted to do, or what their passions are. Let's say their passion is in sales, or they're in this particular department, so they want to do a lot more of it, but they didn't do any analytics to see if it was going to be profitable or if it really made sense for that business. Then we just wind up wasting a ton of money, looking at the P&L at the end of the month and saying, wow, our labor rates are really through the roof because we didn't look at that cash piece. So when we're looking at hiring, it is really just math on capacity. What work isn't getting done? What's getting done later? What's getting done poorly, not to our qualifications? Is it a process problem? Eliminate that first or fix it. And if it's not a process problem, if it's a people problem, great. We need more people, right? Then we have to look at the cash. So we can't hire people just hoping that we're going to be able to budget them and afford them, right? Hope is not a strategy. I've heard one of my former coworkers, Ken, say that quite often, and I love that statement. Hope is not a strategy. So we need to hire based on a plan. Can you cover that role for a bit? Can you make sure that person is getting a paycheck, because you owe them that? Do you know what that role must produce? Now, when I say produce, that doesn't necessarily mean they are directly producing revenue, right? We have people in data analytics and reporting and all these different things that don't directly create revenue, potentially like a sales and marketing department would. But do we know what they must produce? Because everything at the end of the day is going to be supporting that drive to create revenue. And do we have a ramp plan when they come on board versus where we want them to be, right? Do we want them completely locked and loaded? How do we get them there? So if you don't have that ramp already kind of strategized out, which I've done numerous times in the past with my team, especially during some mergers and acquisitions in the T-Mobile Express stores days, we really did have a very short ramp of where we wanted people to be, where we wanted stores to be, and we were able to support them to get to those goals rather quickly. So if you can't, one, strategize that ramp, but two, be able to make sure we can afford people within that ramp, we're not really ready to hire people. We have to be sure that's there. But if we can do those things, if we can show how it's going to support, if we can show how we are as an organization are either going to be able to save money or make more money by the contributions of this individual in this short span of time, then absolutely, let's bring them on board. It only makes sense, right? So a lot of things to think about when we talk about when is the right time to hire. No cookie cutter answer, as I mentioned at the beginning, based on your business, but there are some things to look at: capacity, cash. Is it your processes, or is it the people? And even in some cases, I do have some worksheets that we do in our businesses, depending on the type of business it is, that we just plug in our data. Data drives behavior. So we plug in our data and see, well, how many people should we really need for this? And that's how we hire, right? And making sure that we can afford it. So one thing that I would love for you all to do, if you are kind of thinking about maybe I might be ready to hire, I'm not really sure, is write a 1-page role page. What would right look like for them? right? Then write kind of what are the top 10 things that they need to accomplish? What are the top 10 tasks that they would have to do when they start? And then what would kind of that loose onboarding, and I say loose now because we're just kind of doing an exercise. We would want to fine tune it before you bring that person on. But what would a 2-week onboarding really look like? And that gives you that, 20,000 foot down on, wow, am I really ready to bring on more folks? Am I not? And if you can't do these things, we probably aren't there yet, but no worries. I'm here to help. A few other things I would love for people to think about. What role are you thinking about hiring next and why? If you are thinking about hiring somebody, is it just because you're tired? Which that's okay too, right? Or is it because demand is steady? Or is there a different reason? You're growing, opening more, doing more, whatever that might be. And you have an onboarding plan written down. And again, we'll talk about onboarding a little later in the month as well. But again, I'm here to help. If you want some ideas on the scorecard template, I do have a ready to hire checklist. Hit me up. You can give us a call, reach out on our social media, reach out on our website, shoot me a text message, 732-508-0580. And I'm always here to help. Okay. Next week, let me just make sure I have the right week up. Next week, the true cost of a bad hire. So we do some exercises that talk about what it actually costs to hire somebody, right? The down production time during the recruiting time, if we don't have somebody filling that role, the actual recruiting, the interviewing, the training, all of those things. If it's not done right, what does it actually cost when we're bringing on a new hire? So until then, team, finish your drink. I'm going to finish my tea. Finish your drink. Take a deep breath and go lead with intention today. Thanks so much, everyone.